Department of Emergency Management, and they're going to give us an update on Oahu Coastal Community's Evacuation Plan project. So you're on.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for inviting us. What we're going to do is we have about a 10-minute, 15-minute presentation, a series of slides. After that, subject to your questions, this should be a quick overview of not only our project, but our status update of where we are on this particular project. Let's see. Okay. So we'll quickly go through these quick snapshot of our team members here. And again, we provided everyone a copy of the slides, so you don't need to copious notes. But essentially what we did was we had a parent consulting company, Atkins North America, that does a lot of evacuation planning. And we had a litany of local type consultants supporting that particular effort. These three represent the specific project goals that we had in mind. These represent the particular deliverables that we're looking forward to not only finalizing, but also putting that as part of our inventory of reference materials to be used as part of our planning and implementation reference materials. In particular, the basic premise was looking at distant tsunami threats, which is generally represents 99%. The other threat that we always looked and planned for is what we call the local tsunamis. And that particular scenario is based on a local tsunami that occurs off the island of Hawaii. If a local tsunami is generated, Honolulu has approximately 20, at the very most 25 minutes to evacuate from our coastal locations. And we'll talk about this particular bullet here. Our original work had envisioned us all being finished by September of last year. However, due to some other considerations, we are now looking at finishing in June 2015. One of the key deliverable items is number one, is talking about our gap analysis, looking at the community's risk assessments, looking at evacuation capability, and that's contingent on our current roadway network, if you will, right now. And also in terms of developing detailed planning requirements, specifically best evacuation routes to get the maximum number of persons out of the inundation zones or evacuation zones. Keeping that in mind, we felt very strongly that the community's input for those coastal areas was very important. So we worked very closely with not only the neighborhood boards, but also the local community organizations. As part of the evaluation, we looked at all the existing mapping, looked at the roadways, applied some specific transportation modeling considerations, looked at possible signage, and then ultimately putting it on what we call the geographic information system so that it's not only deployable but also shareable. As you also know, information sharing is critical, and it's very important to show specific what we will call traffic management control plans as they become developed during the various specific incident. What we have not begun, and which is now scheduled for this particular year, through June of 2015 is what we will call the public outreach piece. The public outreach piece is being held in abeyance because we're still evaluating some information with regard to another scenario that we're being asked to look at. So as we continue to develop that, that information is being compared to the data as well as the evacuation route planning efforts that we've already completed. Once we do that, then we'll begin the formal public outreach process. We'll take every opportunity to reach out to those particular committees, if you will, that did provide us input. So again, it'll be around the island with some exceptions. So again, just a synopsis of all the deliverable products that we envision to be provided. Once we get that particular information, we do anticipate coming back to all of you to look at a couple things, key things that is relevant and very important looking ahead is developing of new evacuation zones. And this is tied to specifically some of the scenario or the specific scenario that we've been asked to look at. So that's a work in progress. Then complementing that is going to be an evacuation signage project. Now, as I earlier mentioned, one of the deliverables will be these specific geographical areas, evacuation route maps, if you will. So tied to that, we'll be identifying specific locations for suggested evacuation signage here. One of the other things that we're concurrently on, that is currently ongoing, I should say, we're in the process of developing what we'll call an application, Android/Apple application. And it's going to be unique in the sense that it's going to be tied to each of the 4 counties. As you know, when we go from Honolulu, we have a set of scenarios or hazards that we always look at. Now, if you go over to Maui or Kauai or the Big Island, they also have their own series of hazards. So the application is going to be unique in the sense that if you're on Oahu, you'll be able to pull up and be able to assess through this application all the potential hazards and all the pertinent information. If I then travel to, say, Maui, I'll be able to then pull up the application and the linkages to that specific location. So now you'll be up to date. You'll be able to have state-of-the-art access to all the pertinent information. And we work very closely with our 4 particular counties to integrate this information. So again, this is something that we're looking forward to incorporate a lot of the work that some of our sister agencies as well as federal and state agencies are doing. So this has tremendous implications here for all of us. Then the last piece at the conclusion of our project, one of the things, unfortunately, we just didn't have enough money to cover the entire island for Oahu in terms of all the coastal areas that would be vulnerable. So we looked at the high-risk areas, and obviously we incorporated that as part of our current effort. But we do have what I will call, again, in the category of the gap, some areas that we will also be seeking funding for, and specifically it's Hawaii Kai to the Waipahu areas here. So that kind of gives you a quick snapshot. Now, I know some of the folks that, as I came in, asked, are we going to specifically show the, I guess the product or the mapping that we've already developed and looked at the inundation. We had 2 series of efforts. One is the 2010. So those maps are really available and, you know, accessible through the other site. The other set of data that we're working on, or a series of mappings, is actually right now being developed through another scenario that we've been asked to review. And our goal is to be able to take that information and then integrate that into this particular study. Again, the effort is based on using and taking advantage of the GIS platforms. So as long as we can create, I guess, the digital information, what we're hoping to do is blend the two maps and kind of overlay it. So then you'll have, I guess, the 2010 version, and then we're hoping to, superimpose the new scenario version. And then the decision that we have to make is how we're going to present the differences between 2010 and this new scenario. And again, the scenario that we'll be looking at is unique in the sense that we're looking at a catastrophic situation. If you recall, the 2010 scenario for the tsunamis are based on the historical, I think, the greatest 12 historically that has been archived and based on anecdotal information. The catastrophic approach that we're looking at is based on strictly modeling, taking and extracting worst case factors that we're putting into a model to show what would be the greatest catastrophic implications to the state of Hawaii. Okay, so we're going to be working that, and we're hoping, hopefully by, what is it? I believe September timeframe, that will be somewhat close to that. What I expect is probably, as we refine the data, that we'll probably have an opportunity to share some of that information, maybe not necessarily to the whole committee, but certainly representatives from OahuMPO as we continue to proceed forward. And again, the whole effort is going to be replicated and considered during the public outreach piece. So the communities will all be able to view and provide us input, including OahuMPO. So that's kind of where we are in the snapshot as we move forward. Yes?
Your last slide said that you're going to be seeking funding for evacuation plans for South Oahu.
Yes.
I represent the Waikai Neighborhood Board, so in particular Waikai, they're all the way to Waipahu.
Yes.
So what have you covered? I mean, that seems to be the bulk of the population on the island. So that's kind of a shock to say that you've been focusing on that and you haven't even touched South Oahu. I don't understand. What have you completed there?
Well, we've completed basically, I guess, Waianae or Leeward Coast, North Shore, Kaneohe, and Kailua, and working our way back.
Those priorities?
Well, we looked at the coastal evacuation and the limited amount of access as well as egress. And we looked at it in terms of highest vulnerability and risk. Again, when you look at Waikiki, well, you look at Waikiki and some of the built-up areas, we have multiple means of evacuation routes. Whereas if you look at North Shore, you only have one. So, and the criticality is the timing, depending on where you are. Let's say if you were in Kahuku or Lae. If you have, let's put it this way, a distant tsunami, worst case distant tsunami is probably 4 hours. Can you, if you were in Lae, would you be able to move and evacuate? This is assuming that within the 4 hours we do the analysis and then we make the decision to do the siren notification. As soon as we push the button for the sirens, you know, all hell breaks loose. And it's highly unlikely that if you're in those coastal zone areas that you'll be able to make it out. So what we've looked at it in terms of practical reality is more than likely those particular areas will all be isolated communities. So looking at it, trying to protect and provide refuge areas for these critical areas. The belief is Waikiki, we have the notification in place. Their mode of evacuation is vertical evacuation. Same thing for downtown Honolulu. Iwalei, Hawaii Kai, you have multiple areas to egress. Yes, you do have a limitation. I don't disagree. Kalanianaole is somewhat of a bottleneck, but you have a lot more opportunities to be able to make a decision to evacuate. Whereas the North Shore, I think, is, and Waianae side is a little bit more vulnerable. Yes?
Hey, I saw, yeah, you got a question? And then,
Well, you sort of answered it yet. But when you're talking North Shore, are you coming all the way down to Kaneohe then too?
Yes.
Yeah, we actually did the entire island coming from Ewa all the way to Waimanalo. So we started out with only 8 communities. We actually did the whole thing based on the risk factors for those communities. So we actually did more in this project and squeaked through to cover all of that from Ewa all the way across to Waimanalo. So we used as much funding as we could to capture every single coastal community, and then we ran out of funds.
okay, Linda, and then, go ahead, Linda.
Okay, I'm Kulu Oakland Ikini Board,
Yes.
Board number 2, and this kind of goes in line with what Greg was saying. Okay, I was hoping that, you know, in your geographical area evacuation route plan, that Plan B and Plan C is part of your planning, and if you are considering in your Plan B, you know, having the governor declare that you can go through people's backyards, you know, the acreage, not so you can channel the traffic that way. Is that a feasibility? You know, like,
Well,
especially like North Shore, you know, go.
Well,
go to the private
for the North
property.
Shore specifically, we look at potential routes. Obviously, the preference is to utilize existing roadways, if you will. There are private roads. Those private roads will require special consultations and discussions and negotiations, even to include potential refuge locations. Again, the private landowners, we understand, are more than willing to be sympathetic to the emergency situation. However, they're concerned about damage to their property, both physically as well as environmentally. And the big question is who's going to be the principal responsible party, PRP. So this is something that we're talking to state legislators and trying to establish an approach in terms of working with the private as well as some of the big landowners, including the military.
Or even the state going through state conservation.
Right. State land is also another consideration, but again, everyone has their particular interests. But we've identified those, and it's going to be a process that we have to initiate to achieve all of those. But we've begun at least the initial discussion, so everyone is aware.
Yeah, in July 2012, there was a House bill that was passed, House Bill 2648, which allows people during an emergency situation to evacuate through private property without the private owners having any liabilities if people got injured or hurt on their property. But we're still working with legislation as to using private paths to drive and use vehicles through. We haven't been successful yet.
Arvid and Tom, and then.
Yes.
I had 2 questions, but I'll just focus on one. Are you a counterpart or are you a duplication of a state agency that does some similar work?
I would tell you right now, whenever there's an incident, City and County of Honolulu as the local agency is the responsible agency. Organizationally, if there's an emergency, if the city's assets and capabilities are overwhelmed, then I would advise our mayor to ask the governor for state support. If, in fact, the state is then, in turn, overwhelmed or the resources are not available, then we would proceed up to the next tier, which is the federal level. Now, everything comes at some expense, and obviously policy, certain types of policy like waiver of environmental and private interest concerns are very key. So these are some of the I won't say impediments, but challenges that we have. So as we work our evacuation plan, we need to be mindful of all the different partners and the agencies that will be involved as we are not able to resolve it at the lowest level, which is the local level. Then we'll elevate it to the state and seek their assistance, if we will. And then if necessary, then we'll also engage the military, because in some of the particular cases, some of our evacuation routes are key and essential to use some of the military access lands.
Okay, Tom, Jim, then James. So Tom?
Me?
No, Tom, then Jim. I said Jim.
Yeah. In 1993, the sirens went off at 10 a.m. Everybody downtown, I'm downtown, got in their car from their safe garage and their safe office and got on the coastal highway.
Yes.
The next year, in 94, a similar thing happened, but the timing was different. The sirens went off at 5 a.m. and the word went out, stay home, and there was no traffic jam. People did what they were told to do and stayed home. So I think that the downtown area and Waikiki as well, but Waikiki is more controlled by the hotels. They can tell the tourists what to do, is the vertical evacuation.
Yes.
Because downtown, I'm on the 23rd floor, I can watch the tsunami, even though the inundation zone has been moved in 2010 all the way across town up to Queen Street.
Yep.
Actually Baratania, over by River. So the entire downtown area is an evacuation area, where before the evacuation was only up to the middle of Sand Island. So we always felt the harbor protected us from a tsunami. And the other thing, though, is that there's a big difference between a tsunami which lasts for an hour or two and goes 40 feet and a hurricane that would come across Oahu and last for a couple of days and have, Category 4 winds. So I think that kind of difference makes a difference in what you do. Vertical evacuation works in almost all cases for the downtown and Waikiki buildings because they're solid buildings. And but I'm not sure that everybody understands that. They get in their car and they want to drive home, and getting home is the danger, is the route, because they live in a safe house up on a hill, but the road is not on a hill.
Yeah, I would say education is key to making, to the extent possible, all the communities understand what those safe zones are and the trigger points for initiating evacuation. We are emphasizing our messaging that if you're in a safe area right now, whether you're in town with the vertical evacuation as an option, if you will, to consider that. Our greatest challenge is to keep the flow of traffic moving so that the folks that need to evacuate get out within the specified time. The other thing that we're also trying to emphasize is being situationally aware. Obviously we will have a time sequence in which we will blow all the sirens, if you will, so that the whole island is forewarned. But the issue is being aware of where the point source is. So, for instance, if the tsunami originates from Chile, the minimum first wave arrival is probably, minimum is 12, probably maximum is 16 hours. So you have a lot of time. However, if you look at the flip side, which is the Aleutians and Japan, history has said and has verified it, that at best it's going to be 4.5 hours. 4.5 hours. So you can imagine when the siren goes, it's going to be at 3 hours. The minimum we hit our sirens is 3 hours. So we know once the siren goes, everything goes chaotic. People do a lot of crazy things. Even if they have 16 hours, people still do crazy things. So what we're trying to emphasize is education and situational awareness. So it's very important. The other thing is, you know, I had a daughter in mid-back. My natural tendency is I gotta rush up to the school, grab my daughter, and make it all the way home to IAL. I mean, human instincts are very strong, and it's very hard to change. But it is, I guess what I would ask everyone to be looking at is you gotta have trust. The folks that we entrust are our schools. Geez, we have 200,000 to 300,000, roughly of students in school every day. And we have to trust that they know what to do. But we also need to also believe and trust you as the individual to be, 1, educated, 2, situationally aware, and 3, be responsible. Responsible in terms of being able to make the appropriate decision, hopefully, that if you're in a safe zone, stay safe, stay in your location. However, if you're not, again, this is the personal choice. Do you evacuate? And again, first wave arrival is based on the best scientific information. Are we always going to be right? And is it going to be 7:59 and exactly at 10 seconds? Ain't going to be. As we